Good afternoon, tribe. Good Friday, actually. Hoping everybody's having a great day. Going into this Memorial Day weekend. Is it Memorial Day weekend or is that next weekend? Maybe I've got them all confused. I don't know. Everything's like running together at this point. But I'm going to let people start jumping on. And as you jump on, make sure up in the comments, you'll see a link for you to go on if you would like to comment and your name to be seen. And your little icon to be seen, please go give StreamYard permission to do that. We want to have everybody tell us where are you watching from, and if you have any questions for our guest today, please put them in the comments. I'm looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this all day. Actually, I've been looking forward to the last week and a half you and I talked, and I was so bummed. As a lot of you may or may not have seen, when we had this originally scheduled on Tuesday, we were told Tuesday morning that we had to put our sweet little Ferocia down, and she had heart failure. So we were really bummed, and we were bummed to miss this, but we obviously to say goodbye to her. She's been with us for 12 years. So anyway, lived a really long, good life. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Susan. Hey, Tammy. Hey, Camille. Hey, Frank. Great to see you guys on. If I see a lot of people attend, a whole lot of people. Hey, Wendy. Glad to have you guys on. So excited about this. So my guest today is Dr. David Martin, and I actually saw one of your videos a few weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I have to talk to this guy. I think, did my team put you in touch with Dr. Buttar? Because he's definitely, I don't know if you've had contact with him yet.
Well, he has been triangulated into a bunch of what we're doing because I've worked for a long time with Sasha Stone with the International Tribunal of Natural Justice. Sasha and I go back over a decade. We worked together on the New Earth Project when it was just getting started. So I have had that triangulation. I have had a number of other people put our names into the same orbit. He and I have not had a direct interaction, but we have been working on a lot of common purposes.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited for you two to connect for sure, because Dr. Buttar is like one of my heroes right now, and so are you. So
thank you.
So do you want to just like really quickly tell everybody who you are, what your background is, and why you and I are actually talking today?
Yeah, well, the simple thing is if people want to go on to davidmartin.world, you can read the very long biographical and a bunch of other content up there. My formal training way back was in 3 different areas: psychology, medicine, and law. My degrees are from Goshen College, Ball State University, and the University of Virginia. I was on the medical school faculty at the University of Virginia and started the state of Virginia and the country's first clinical trials program specifically for medical devices way back in the early 90s. First for-profit company run out of a university in Virginia, and was very instrumental with the late Senator Emily Kirk in setting up the state of Virginia's first Secretary of Technology, which was the very first time technology and science were a cabinet level position in a government. So I've been in the government sector. My technology, which is core to the businesses that we run around the world right now in finance and white collar criminal investigation, law enforcement, and intelligence, is a technology platform called Linguistic Genomics, which looks for the intent of communication most of the time for trying to discern whether there are good actors or bad actors and what they're trying to do. So not surprisingly, a lot of the work that I've been doing since September of 2019 on this pandemic, and you heard me right, since September 2019 on this pandemic, a lot of the work that we've been doing has been looking at the fact that something smelled rotten and fishy. And like a lot of the other projects we've done tons of white collar criminal investigations for the US Treasury Department, tax fraud investigations, large scale corporate fraud, international fraud. We've done that for securities organizations around the world, looking at both mining abuses and country level economic violations. So we have an investigative side of our business, we have an investing side of our business, and then we have what we call innovation literacy, which is an outreach program to try to get communities around the world to understand how to leverage human ingenuity and how to build businesses that are constructive for the futuring of humanity. And so those three pieces are kind of what I juggle every day. And this conversation is the natural outgrowth of kind of pieces of all of them. So that's fun.
Yes. So, man, we are at an unprecedented time in history. I mean, I don't know, even back in, World War II era, that the citizenry particularly of the United States, has been under the kind of draconian law that's happening currently. And so I would love for you to talk about the constitutional law. We are hearing all over the place that there are governors, mayors, attorney generals of different municipalities and stuff coming out and saying, because of the state of emergency, your constitutional rights are suspended and you do not have the right to assemble. You do not have the right. And now we're seeing free speech getting thrown right out the window too.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to talk about our constitutional rights and what the state of emergency, if it has any bearing on them at all, and if so, what, and if not, what to do.
Okay, so the very unpopular thing I say, because people don't want to hear it, but that's why it's unpopular, is that we have two questions that are before us. The first question is, did any governor in late February or early March have the legal basis for the declaration of state of emergency? That's a very fundamental question, because it turns out everything that they did after that is derived from the preamble of something that they said, which was, there's a thing that is justifying a state of emergency. Here's a tiny problem. The answer to that question, spoiler alert, is no governor, no public health officer in late February or early March could have had the legal basis to declare a state of emergency. And by that, I mean that the courts have held that if you're going to declare a state of emergency, number one, you have to have evidence to declare it. You cannot just say, I think there's going to be an alien invasion on Tuesday, and because of that, everybody has to go into a bomb shelter. You can't say that. You actually have to have evidence. And the problem that we're going to get to in this conversation is there's no way that they had it. And worse than that, because of a conspiracy of government agencies and certain corporations, there was no way they could have had the information. So even if their spirit of the law was right, the facts upon which they made the declarations were unconstitutional, illegal, and there is no governor except from what I just said. Now, you made a statement that was very interesting, which is, have we ever been here before? And the answer to that is, we have never had any provision in the history of this country since we had the Constitution and since we've had constitutional amendments. We have never had a situation where a healthy population at liberty was penalized for being healthy and a population at liberty. We have never had in this country, even during, and you were really great in pointing out World War I and World War II, where there were War Powers Acts that were passed, which said people had to go to work in factories and people had to make planes and people had to make boats and people had to make boots and all that kind of stuff. There have been War Powers Acts invoked, so I don't want to misstate the historical relevance of this. But there has never in the history of this country been a space where a governor of a state has been able to capriciously single out industries, hospitality, restaurants, bars, gyms, nutrition stores, things that were deemed non-essential. No one has ever been able to shut down capriciously and arbitrarily sectors of the economy and keep them closed to the point where there is no recovery. That has never happened. And it is without precedent. And more importantly, it's illegal because the restraint of trade between states is not a state function, it's a federal function. And the minute you're a governor and you issue a stay-at-home order, you've actually not stayed within your state. You've actually now crossed state lines and you've put yourself in the crosshairs of commerce acts. And that's not the state's jurisdiction, that's federal jurisdiction. And every single governor that issued stay-at-home orders has violated that. So we are at this bizarre place where not only are we absolutely way off the cliff. I feel like I'm in one of those cartoons where, you run off the edge of the cliff, and as long as you don't look down, you don't fall down. And I feel like every governor right now is just spinning their feet, running past clouds going, please don't look down, because I know what I'm doing is illegal. I know what I'm doing is killing my state's economy, but I've committed to the story that I can run on clouds, so I have to keep running. Yeah. The minute they look down, they'll crash.
Yeah. Wow. That's actually quite a visual. So, I'm obviously in the state of Texas.
Yep.
Our governor declared, actually, I think it was our city declared state of emergency on March 13th is when we went into lockdown. Our governor opened us up 2 weeks ago, and he and our mayor have been going back and forth, where the mayor has, the governor has told him to stand down, and the mayor is saying, dude, I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
He's trying to keep us in a lockdown until June 15th. The entire city said, screw you, and everybody's out. So it's a little bit interesting just to see how all of that's played out. So my question to you is, as an individual citizen of this country and of whatever state or city or municipality or town or village or whatever that you are part of, what is it that you can do to ensure that your rights are upheld?
Well, the bad news, let's get to the bad news first. The bad news is that criminal organizations include governors and mayors and municipalities, right? We have this nostalgic view that once upon a time in Chicago, there were corrupt cops. Mm-hmm. And once upon a time, the mafia bought off, somebody in Boston. Well, newsflash, there's a new mafia. The new mafia is called the collusion between certain pharmaceutical companies and certain social media companies and certain media companies and their investors. They're now the ones that are running the mob. So we call it a different thing and we sterilize it and we pretend like we're in this postmodern view where people aren't running around with guns shooting out of really cool old cars. But at the end of the day, every governor who has decided to use this particular pandemic scare as a means to enrich their state's budget so that they get the government to send them emergency funds, or they get ventilators, or they get whatever they are looking for. Every governor is doing a shakedown, and it's old school 1920s mob, and we need to call it what it is. Mm-hmm. There is no basis in fact for what they are doing. They are doing it as an opportunistic grab of resources using their pathetic police state powers. Now, that's a real statement. And it was as true when the mob was running Chicago as it is today when Gilead Pharmaceutical or Sanofi or Johnson & Johnson is running the mob today. It is the same mob. They're using the same methodology. Every citizen has to understand that they first have to say no. No to the things which are capricious. What are capricious? There is no clinical evidence for the 6-foot distancing thing. That was something that was made up in a computer simulation, and there is no basis in clinical fact that says anything about this particular virus, or for that matter, most other viruses, going 6 feet. There's nothing magical about 3 feet. There's nothing magical about 6 feet. And until we actually know how many people already were exposed to the coronavirus through serology, we have no idea whether this thing is even being transmitted, right? Because people are saying that there's a growth in cases, but they're not saying, oh, by the way, we tested more people and found out people are exposed to coronavirus. Newsflash, the human race is exposed to viruses. Boom. Yeah. There. Earth shattering. It's not earth-shattering. The point is that we're in a situation where they're making up an illusion that there's a thing that isn't happening. We just saw that several states have retracted their official numbers today and yesterday because it turns out they were double and triple counting people. The whole thing has been an absolute charade that has been conducted for the media, pornographic obsession with illness and death. And we need to call it for what it is. But people have to say no to the things that have no value. People have to remember that the Journal of the American Medical Association, I'm not talking about some sort of right-wing conspiracy theory, crazy kind of idea. The Journal of the American Medical Association, which, by the way, is bought and paid for by pharmaceutical companies, published a peer-reviewed study that said face masks do nothing to a healthy population. So that's a fact. Yeah. Say no. Keep saying no. Now, what that means is that you're going to have thugs who are bought off by pharma. They are bought off by media. They are bought off by special interest. You're going to have thugs that come in and try to rough you up. And what does that mean? They'll threaten you with fines, and they'll threaten you with arrest, and they'll threaten you with all kinds of other things. And here's a tiny little piece of advice. That's your ticket to make history. Your ticket to make history is still say no. Because it turns out that they cannot do anything without ultimately getting this to a court. And the point that I have made to tons of people is the court is not your enemy. The court is the only means by which we have in our society as a citizenship to seek redress until we, and by we I mean Michelle, you, me, and everybody listening to this, decides it's time to form the Constitution Party or the Liberty Party and address the legislative problems which have given rise to these problems, which is something else we can be doing. This can be a moment where we decide that we, the people, need to stand together. And we don't stand for those individuals who have sold their soul and their morality in exchange to get the power that they think they have. We as a citizenship, we as a people must stand on our rights and say no to the thugs that are running this show.
Amen. I mean, like, that was like the perfect soapbox thing right there.
It is. It's Friday afternoon. It is a soapbox. There you go.
Yeah.
But seriously, it's time for us to say we've been handed an opportunity, right? We have not been represented by our representatives, but that means that it's time for some of us to say, okay, it's time to step into the arena. It's time to be the people who listen to and respect the people.
Awesome. Hey, I'm getting a question, and I assume if you can send it to me, you can private chat me right there. If you can pull the link for the study for that JAMA article on the masks, that would be awesome.
Yeah, hang on a second. Let me do this. Actually, yeah, let me see if I can grab it really quick here. Yeah, I can really quick. That's cool. I like being able to do things really quick. So March 4th, and let me just read the section, which is really cool. Face masks should not be worn by healthy individuals to protect themselves from acquiring respiratory infection. Like, I don't know how many people could actually go, I wonder what they really mean by that. I wonder if that means something, or here we go. So I pop it into your chat thing.
Our mainstream media could figure out a way to twist that. I mean, they're just damn good at it. So,
but the fact of the matter is, this is the only peer-reviewed statement that JAMA ever made, and I just sent it through your chat.
Awesome! I got it. Whoops! I sent it back through the chat for some reason. Hold on, I'm going to post it to the comments real quick.
Yeah.
There y'all go.
But the fact of the matter is, carry that with you, carry a copy of that with you when you go out and say, it's against medical advice to wear a mask. I'm not wearing a mask because it's against medical advice. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you tell me what sheriff, what deputy, what mayor, what city council member, what whoever is going to be able to out medically credential the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Yeah. Awesome. I like it. Thank you. I shared it in the comments, you guys. So y'all go share.
Yeah.
You definitely want to share that. So I wanted to ask you, so the big thing, of course, right now is, which has been a big hubbub all week long about, I think, is it Gilead? It might be Gilead. No, it's Moderna.
Yeah.
That they think they've got a vaccine. And of course, now my understanding is that Stat came out and said, nope, what they're telling you isn't the truth, which is, again, another medical medium magazine, whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
that is actually very, again, tied to pharma, tied to all of that, but they're actually coming out and calling it for what it is and saying the data is not there. There were 45 test subjects. 3 had really bad, what do you call it?
Adverse events.
Adverse reactions.
Yep.
And that the data is not there to show that it actually is effective.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So, well, let's get into the vaccine thing, because that's
all right. Let's do that. And let's make sure, I'm going to give you another reference, just because if we're in the mood for references, let's go ahead and have a really cool reference. I'm going to give you a reference that is the most misquoted, and courtesy of a individual accused of pedophilia and of rape and of all kinds of other things. For some reason, that credentials you to speak on national television about the fact that you as a person should be subject to your body being intruded, which I find interesting coming from an accused rapist, also known as Alan Dershowitz. The funny thing, and I'm saying funny because it's not funny, is Alan used the case I just sent you, which is the Jacobson v. Massachusetts 1905. Cool. So Alan uses Jacobson v. Massachusetts as a statement that justifies what he said, which is the state can come to your house, hold you down, and jab a needle into your arm. Like, okay. And remember, this coming from a guy accused multiply of rape and multiply of pedophilia. So let's make sure we understand who's sticking what into who, right?
Right. Can I ask, I want to jump in there real quick and just say this to you. When I saw his video, I thought just what he's saying, in my opinion, was terroristic. It's
not just terroristic. It's a statement that is the legal definition of rape. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised, because it turns out it may be the case that he's familiar with rape as a person who has been accused of perpetrating such actions. I'm not sitting here going, oh, this is a wonderful human being who's been a model citizen. Remember, he was defending Jeff Epstein. Remember that.
Yes.
Right? This is a guy who also defends Jeff Epstein. So when I hear a person like that with that level of credibility misquote a Supreme Court case and tell you that you can be raped in your own home, I'm not surprised that he's saying it. But let's get really clear on the 1905 total 100% lied about decision made by the Supreme Court.
Right.
Because every vaccine promoter on the planet goes, well, the police can come in and mandate a vaccine and you have to take it. Let me just set the record straight. What the Supreme Court ruled was very simple. That Jacobson failed to provide evidence that his argument could stand up to the determination of the state of Massachusetts, which was you either get a vaccination or you pay a fine of $5. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
You either get a vaccination or you pay a fine of $5. The case had nothing to do with mandatory vaccination. It had to do with, can you be placed in a situation where you either take the vaccination or pay a fine?
Right.
And the fine in this case was $5. Do you know what no public health officer has ever told you about that case?
No, why?
What I just said. No one has ever said that the case had nothing to do with police authority to force you to take something that was experimental and unproven. What it did say is that a community can say, in the face of in this case, in the face of an outbreak of smallpox, I think it was smallpox. In the case of outbreak of smallpox, the community can say enough of us have had it and enough of us are taking the vaccination that we as a community decide that the evidence supports the vaccination. That's the actual facts in 1905. The Supreme Court also did not say that you can be forced to take an experimental drug.
Right.
So I don't care who you are. And by the way, I'm going to call out the anti-vaxxers right now. Stop pretending like you have to do something. You don't. You are under no obligation by the Supreme Court ruling in 1905. Fast forward to Nuremberg trials. Human experimentation can only be done with informed consent. And informed consent says somebody gives you all the risks and benefits, and then you have the sovereignty to say no. Mm-hmm. Guess what, people? They can't walk in. Even the rapists and pedophiles who want to do this cannot walk in and jab you in the arm because they do not have protection under the Supreme Court ruling that has been misquoted. And by the way, if you look at CDC's internal documentation on this, it makes you sick. They know what I said, and they know the facts of the case. And they even have slide presentations on how to make sure the public doesn't have access to the right information to have access to this information. Just like they said in the Juho v. Williamson case in California, they have slide decks to teach you how to mislead the public so that the public gets into these silly debates about police authority to march into your house and vaccinate you. There is no authority for that. And the Supreme Court in 1905 didn't rule that you could be forcibly forced into vaccination. And in 2011, when the Supreme Court ruled on the vaccine liability situation, they also didn't rule on the compulsory nature of vaccines. What they did rule was that the plaintiffs in that case had failed to establish that a vaccine manufacturer who willfully failed to make the vaccine safe could be held liable based on the exemption from liability that Congress passed years earlier. So every public health officer who lies to their public and says, the Supreme Court says we have this right. No, it doesn't. Read the case, carry the case, and if some idiot comes to your door with a needle, say no.
So this is one of my other questions for you too. So the ideas around, okay, I can force a vaccination, all of these things, the idea around all of that part, that's scary enough. But again, I'm like, I know that that's not my constitutional rights prevent that from happening. The other side of this is that if you fail to get the vaccine, if you fail to get the chip, if you fail to get all of the bullshit that Bill Gates is trying to sell him and Fauci are trying to sell to everybody, if you fail to get all of those things, that now you are going to basically be shunned.
A second-class citizen, right?
So you will not be able to go to the grocery store, to public places, to the library, to the post office. Your kids won't be able to go to school, blah, 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 all of these things. You won't be able to travel. You won't be able to go see your grandma. I don't know.
Do you realize that when a couple of years ago, you'll remember, and I had the good fortune, my oldest daughter predates the HPV vaccination, right? So, and my daughter, Sienna, right now, going to school here in Virginia, was told that she had to have certain vaccinations to go to school. And I said, no, she doesn't. And that's not going to happen. And we filled out the form, by the way, that said that we weren't going to authorize it. And ironically, she happened to miss the day they were doing it, but she was actually on the list scheduled to get the vaccination, even though we had said no. Wow. So we had said no. And because unconsidered, thoughtless people just line people up and do dumb things. Thankfully, she didn't get the vaccination, and and she's not going to. We actually think in that particular case that there are parents who actually have beautiful relationships with their children. We happen to have beautiful relationships with our children. And we have conversations about lifestyle and choices and how to do things or what to do and so forth. And those are things that are our decisions in our home, and that's where they're going to stay. But as much as people tried to legislate HPV as a compulsory vaccination, they couldn't do it. And they couldn't do it because of what I just got done saying. They couldn't do it because you cannot create an exclusion based on the participation in an experimentation or in a forced event where there is not a population in a community established by legislation that says that it can be done. This is a time for all of us to hold our elected officials accountable or get rid of them. Because they cannot do something that the law does not allow. They cannot force you to be a part of a clinical trial. They cannot force you to do something, and they can't create a dual class of citizenship, which is what all of the court precedents have been around this, which says that you cannot be restricted from free movement because you didn't participate. You can't be penalized for exercising your rights.
Well, and this is the other thing that I find super interesting as well. So the other, study that came out in USC and Stanford not that long ago with zero prevalence, where they showed that a much higher number of in population of people as they started testing were actually they already had, I guess it's IgG, is that, so they already had some antibodies. So they had already apparently been exposed. They were asymptomatic, never had any kind of symptoms. And this is another thing that's, so I want to make sure I get this in here before you start answering this so that we can get all of these questions. Yeah. So this is the other thing is that everybody keeps saying, well, just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean you won't actually give this to somebody else. But there's mixed information about that. Yes.
No, there isn't mixed. There is no information about it.
Okay.
There is every study which has reported alleged asymptomatic transmission has also only done it with the failure to disclose the testing to active positive population ratio. You didn't get it from asymptomatic people.
No.
And no one can prove that you can. And people have tried, by the way, they've desperately tried to show this. And even with their desperate attempts to show it, they haven't been able to show it. Right. There is zero clinical evidence of asymptomatic transmission. There are subjective statements being made that people say they think that you can do it. But it turns out that thinking that you might be able to theoretically do something and doing it are two different things. And it turns out for all the face mask adherents and all the people who social distance adhere and everything else, no one has been able to establish that a person who does not sneeze, does not cough, does not vomit, does not, effusively have diarrhea in public, whatever it would take, right? No one has been able to show. Oh, by the way, or the last study, which was to terrorize us all, was it shows up in semen. So I guess if you're the pedophile rapist, it might come that way.
What's next? Hold on.
Seriously. You just sit there going, seriously, can you make this goofier? But the fact is, we do not have any means of transmitting a thing without the propellant, whatever the propellant is, my cough, my sneeze, my whatever. And so this illusion of asymptomatic transmission was all based on an assumption that you can get it by touching something. Let's remember the tiny little study that came out this week, which none of us were supposed to look behind the mirror. Don't look. The CDC came back and said, well, you know what? Our theory that you can get it by touching things, it doesn't look like you can as much. It looks like it doesn't transmit that way. Now, did any public official, did any mayor of the city of Austin go, hey, people, remember the bullshit story I told you about face masks and social distancing. Well, it turns out that the very organization that I relied on to give me that guidance has now come back saying that another one of their assumptions has had a hole shot through it. Therefore, let's go ahead and live at liberty. Did the mayor ever dial back the intensity of stupidity because somebody got something wrong? No. But every one of them lies to the public and says, this is a science-based, evidence-based plan. No, it isn't. It is a plan. It is a script that has been handed to people who believe that by continuing to destabilize and terrorize the population, they can gain political advantage in November and they can gain economic advantage now. Newsflash. This is worse by orders of magnitude than whatever Russia collusion may or may not have happened, whatever China sniping could or couldn't have happened. This is worse because we are watching Americans commit domestic terrorism acts against Americans, and the elected officials are leading the charge.
Yeah. Again, another great soapbox. I was like, it's really, all of this has been so, it's so hard to understand why people are not getting this. Like, you see all over, particularly social media, the shame that's being perpetuated on other people. How dare you? You're so selfish that you wouldn't wear a mask. Why wouldn't you wear a mask to save other people? And I'm like, show me one. I'm just saying, show me one study that shows that it makes any sense for a healthy person to wear a mask. Never, my understanding, have we ever in our history ever quarantined a healthy population. We've only saved the sick.
And Michelle, it's worse because the same people who allege that social distancing and face masks work didn't read the U.S. Army's actual study on social distancing, which, by the way, there has only been one controlled trial of social distancing that I've been able to access in any clinical population. And are you ready for this? It was the pandemic of the Spanish influenza in 1918. But here's the terrible news that you're not told. In that study, the people subject to social distancing had worse infectivity than the people who are in the general population. So the only controlled trial that anyone has been able to publish in a peer-reviewed study done by the U.S. Army in the outbreak of what was called the Spanish influenza, in that study, social distancing not only wasn't good, it was worse than having people in a general population with the sick quarantined. So here's the terrible thing. To your point, if you ask for the science, you are being considered to now be un-American.
Oh, like, yeah.
If you actually say, hey, show me the evidence and I'll shut up. You know, I've done this in my videos. In my videos, I say to people all the time, look at the references. And the minute you can show me a reference that is in disagreement with what I have posted, that is not, and I have one criteria, which is don't give me a computer simulation. Because I don't give a rip what you put in a computer simulation. I can say anything with a computer model and I can make it work. I'm actually that good with computers. I can do that. I could say that if we walk around on our hands on Tuesdays and eat bananas with our left hand while standing on our right hand, we all don't get coronavirus. And that's going to be empirically a true statement. And I'll be able to show that most people who have walked around on their hands on Tuesdays eating bananas with their left hand don't get coronavirus.
Yeah.
Cool.
Doesn't make it so. No, it doesn't make it so. I think it's funny because there's a lot of stuff that's coming back. Like people are finding old videos of like Ronald Reagan and all this stuff. And there was this really great quote. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's really one of the best quotes I've ever heard. And he said, it is not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It is that they know so many things that just are not so.
Well, and here's the problem. I have served under both Democrat and Republican governors, and I've served both Democrat and Republican presidents. Mm-hmm. I happen to have the the experience of my life, in part because I still hold to the notion that it is good for us as citizens to have open dialogue and debate. And when it comes down to it, neither party has ever done it right all the time. So my view is I'm going to stay in a space of saying I like to remain an American first, and then politically make my decisions based on that. Now, I say that because one of the things that I found fascinating about the history of the way in which political systems have worked around here is that there's an intent to polarize. And my view on this is very simple, which is as much as I might appreciate certain values of the Democratic Party, I need to be able to say that in this particular case, they are pathologically on the wrong side of history. You cannot look at the data right now and not look at the fact that people who think that by crushing civil liberties, they somehow can take out their vendetta against President Trump, you can't help but see that that is self-evidently the case.
Right.
When you have, and by the way, I am not defending everything that President Trump has done or said or anything else. I think that there are reprehensible behaviors that a lot of people have done over their life, and I'm not endorsing it. But when an attorney general of the state of Michigan says that the president is not welcome in a state, I'm just going to call it out. That's a bridge too far.
I agree.
Because you may very well find the individual to be someone with whom you have issues. Fair enough. But I don't care who you are as a pathetic attorney general of any state anywhere in this union. The office of the president of the United States is not demeaned by some pathetic political platform where somebody wants to score cool points by saying that she sent a nasty letter to the president. That is unacceptable, no matter how reprehensible the behavior of the individual may or may not be. The fact that the president has elected to show up in Michigan, is elected to say, I'm not going to fall for stupid recommendations of contrived medical interventions that have been proven not to do anything. The fact that he's done that and overruled the pathetic outreach of a governor and an attorney general who have no medical training whatsoever and haven't evidenced a single shred of science in this entire campaign. I'm sorry, you're not entitled to demean the president of the United States. And I'm not defending Mr. Trump. I'm simply saying the office of the president is a little more important than your pathetic grandstanding in Michigan.
I'm totally agree. I was a little bit appalled. I was like, man, who does Dana Nacelle think she is? Like, what the heck?
No, it's scoring cool points. And there are a few people for whom that little saber rattling moment is her little Me Too moment to shine. I'm not going to be put down by a president, whatever. You know what? The office of the president deserves dignity and decorum and respect. And if you're going to expect that the president is going to rise to that standard, then you as a citizen better rise to the standard too.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that. So let me ask you this: what, besides obviously our standing our ground, saying no, what are the other things that can be done right now as citizens to be able to start disarming the the powers that be, these governors, mayors, whatever, attorney generals, whoever they think they are?
Yep.
What are the things that we can do as individual citizens to start disarming them and letting them putting them on notice and saying, I'm sorry, but you know what? My rights are mine and you cannot take them. What are those things that
three steps. There's the today moment, there's the intermediate moment, there's the long-term moment. The today moment is that we need, as citizens, and we need, like I said to you, Michelle, in your business, we need to form actual legal cases where we sue for criminal damages arising from criminal acts. Every governor and every public health officer and every mayor that perpetrated an act of domestic terrorism, which is to coerce a population and to seek to influence a government is in fact in violation of Section 802 of the Patriot Act. That's a felony. That's jailable and finable. And we need to be bringing those charges against the elected officials who enslaved us. That is not a maybe. That is not a possibly. We need to do it. And I'll tell you why. The reason is because if you count the numbers that CDC reports, as desperately as they're disappointed with this, COVID hasn't lived up to influenza and pneumonia. We're still having more people die of idiopathic, which means we don't know the source of its origin. We still have more people dying of pneumonia and influenza than we have dying of COVID. And they're very bummed about that because they've tried to make the numbers match and it still won't work. Now, what that tells you is that they're waiting to declare another pandemic on another virus. And it's very clear that they want to do that, which is the reason why we keep being told about the measles outbreak that's coming or another coronavirus that's coming. The fact of the matter is, as long as they can't account for the deaths, they're going to use those deaths to make up the cover story. We have to make it abundantly clear to public health officers, mayors, and governors that if you do this again, it's a jailable offense. It is a financial penalty. And under domestic terrorism and under antitrust laws, which I've articulated in my work, this is, if it's a corporation, $100 million liability. If it's an individual, it's $1 million to $10 million liability, depending on what's going on. The fact is that until people know that they cannot commit a crime, they will keep hiding behind what they think is sovereign immunity. And that's the problem. Every fig leaf that every governor and every mayor and every public health officer is hiding behind is, well, we did our best. We thought there was an emergency, so we did our best. Well, I'm sorry. When you put up MASH hospitals in Central Park or in downtown regions so that the public can see this is to be feared, you are engaging in domestic terrorism. You are terrorizing your population to coercion, and the definition under Section 802 of the Patriot Act says that is domestic terrorism. We must take that on. That's number one. The intermediate step is that we have to realize that we were asleep. And by that, I mean all of us were asleep. Until now, we did not read the public health statutes in our states that allowed silly unelected officials, many of whom wouldn't know health if it bit them in the behind,
No kidding.
to actually have unlimited power under police acts. That has to change, and that's a legislative act, and no person being elected into a state house or into Congress should be allowed to run on a platform that doesn't include limiting the powers of unelected officials. If that's not part of everybody's campaign speech, I don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican, if you want to go onto a ballot in November, you better pull the plug on the unrestricted use of police powers. Because if we don't do that, we're going to do this again. And so let's stand up and be warned. And the third thing, which is the thing I said kind of in jest, but I'm not jesting, it's time for a political party that actually supports the Constitution.
Yeah.
Period. And it is time that we have real elections with real officials who do not have skeletons in their closet, or at least can introduce us to the skeletons that are in their closet. We need to have real people who actually stand up in public service and say, this is about getting the Constitution back.
Right. I'm in complete agreement with you. That's the other thing is that we need to also look at, and I would assume there's some thing for us to do around the fact that because we've come down to a two-party system, it is simply because of the fact that they can actually take campaign donations from lobbies and from PACs. And that's the real reason why we have been split down to these two parties that are controlling everything, that in reality really are the same side of are two sides of the same coin.
There's no question. And I several weeks ago I did a video on YouTube about following the money. And I talked about the fact that the same people who were supporting the public health interventions were the same people supporting the media, which was the same people supporting life insurers, that were same people. And it was the same lobbying firm, not a lot of lobbyists, the same firm who were essentially maintaining the theoretical distance between Democrat issues and Republican issues. But this goes to this deeper question, Michelle, is as citizens of this country, somewhere along the line, we decided good people can't make it in politics. Now, unfortunately, that probably has a lot of truth. But here's the other side of it. I'm going to ask the question, have we really tried? Right? Have we really tried? Have we really said, is there in fact an opportunity for real, genuine people who really support the public good to really make a difference? And the answer is, I think most of us have stopped that conversation at cocktail parties, and we actually haven't gone all the way to say, let's make a go of it.
Yeah, well, the thing is at the end of the day, as voters, we're just really lazy. I mean,
right.
How do you have like senators like Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and you name it? There's tons of them. They've all been in there for 4 decades, and we're no further along than when those started. And so it's like, well, how do you just keep doing that? And the problem is that whole idea of choosing the lesser evil. Stop choosing the lesser evil and actually choose somebody that actually believes what you believe. Correct.
And how many house races are going to be uncontested this fall? Right? Yeah. We can't pretend to concern ourselves with liberty. We can't pretend to concern ourselves with the violation of our rights when we have had this kind of problem.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much for today. I so appreciate it. And you guys, if you are watching this on replay, or even if you were watching live here, if you have more questions for David, I'll get him to come back and answer them at a later time, or maybe just have him come back on again. Biden's been in for 50 years. Yeah. And changed. I didn't like that dude during, I could not stand him during the Clarence Thomas hearings. It drove me insane to just even hear his voice. So, I hear you. So if any of you have questions, put them in the comments. Please share this with somebody that you know, particularly people who are right now very fearful around being forced to have vaccinations, about being forced to wear masks, being forced to socially distance. I can tell you at this point, the only reason I am wearing a mask anywhere is if the place that I am going to is really more concerned about their people, and their people are afraid. And I'm very good and very kind about educating them and giving them the science that I am aware of, and saying, this is it. And they're like, we really appreciate that. And our people are scared. And I'm like, I totally understand that, totally get that. The thing is that we need to start really educating people on what's really real here. And the thing is that, and it's hard because people are, I've been so attacked in the last few weeks when I say that I'm not worried about getting COVID-19. I'm not. I'm totally not worried about it because I'm a healthy person.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they've made such a big deal about is the deaths, but what they haven't made a big deal about is that the survival rate is 99.8%. Like, at least that, maybe even more. It might even be 99.9.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is that the survival rate is that 99.8% of us will live. We will not. We might get sick. I'm not saying you won't get sick. I'm just saying, highly unlikely you're going to have really a whole lot of whatever. Remember that the people that are dying are people who are already with lots of comorbidities, really sick already, or probably already, and they are saying, they've even said this a number of times, that a lot of these people would have probably died by the end of the year. Now, this may have sped it up, but they would have died by the end of the year. We need to really understand all of that and not be like, well, you're selfish and you're this, and people's lives are more important than you going to work and whatever. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I keep saying is that a policy cannot save lives. It can only trade them. That's all that's happening here, is we are trading lives, because what ultimately the big killer is poverty. The
Yep.
big killer is suicide. The big killer is having people that are at home being abused and neglected, children dying of hunger. All of those things are all going to be byproducts of what's happened here.
Right.
So the cure is already worse than the disease. So
by orders of magnitude. Yes.
Yeah. And so this is the thing, but I am just going out there and saying what I know to be true, and take the hits, whatever. I want to just say this though, people, please understand. Remember what it was like when you woke up. Just remember what it was like when you woke up. It's painful. It sucks. You're very disillusioned. You're questioning your sanity. You're questioning everything that you've believed. You can't believe that you would ever be duped or lied to, and that you would have ever believed it, that you would ever be that naive.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we've all been there. So be kind when you are dealing with somebody that is just starting to wake up, and that when you are questioning the very belief system that they have.
Exactly right.
Been very difficult for people to wake up to this. And the only way that we wake people up to this is through being kind and loving, and no matter what they say to us, because at the end of the day, that's the only way we're going to wake them up. So thank you so much, David, for coming on.
It's a delight. Thanks for hosting it.
Of course. And I'll probably have you come back on again here soon. I'd love to, we're in the process of getting Judy Mikovits scheduled, and
good.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. Oh, I did have one question for you. It was at the beginning, and then it just now came back to me. So tell me a little bit. Are you familiar with Russell Gould?
Just the name. I have not done any work with him.
Okay, trying to get information there a bit. Through all of this process, we're all getting shuffled so much stuff. So I was just going to ask the question, but you guys, please share this widely. And if you have questions, put them in the comments, and we will get David to come back and answer them.
Very good.
You guys have a fabulous weekend. I don't know is it Memorial Day? I don't have any clue. I think it's Memorial Day weekend, but I'm not sure. It might be the following weekend. I don't know. Anyway, everything's running together, but you guys have a fabulous weekend, and we'll be back again with you shortly. So thanks for joining us.